Welcome to the Pretty Deadly podcast. My name is Susie Kahlich. I'm the founder of Pretty Deadly Self-Defense, a self-defense program that I developed based on my experiences as a violent crime survivor and my 25 years training in the Japanese art of ninjutsu. Welcome back to the Pretty Deadly podcast. In the incident that I experienced that finally pushed me into learning martial arts and self-defense, I experienced two things that not only helped me survive that situation, but that also taught me a lot about how our biological self-defense system works. And that's what I want to talk about today and why it's useful to listen to podcasts like this one when we want to learn about self-defense. True crime podcasts are really popular among women specifically. And I think a lot of people think that they're popular among women because women love the salaciousness of it. They love the sort of gossipy tone that some of them have. They love to be scared. But what they're actually doing is learning how to survive in these situations. Maybe they're doing that on a subconscious level, but that's what they're doing. Listening to true crime podcasts can be really great learning tools. Listening to a podcast like this one can be a great learning tool. Your brain stores tons of information, and you have no way of knowing what it has stored away from years before and what it hasn't until it pops up or until you actually need it and can't find it, right? So everything that you consume as a human being, I don't mean eat, I mean through all of your senses, podcasts, songs, newspaper articles, magazine articles, books that you read, movies that you watch, TV shows that you're fond of, conversations that you have with friends, things that you just witness in your day-to-day life. All of these are pieces of information that your brain and your body educate themselves on. They're part of the tools that your brain and your body keep as things that it might need to use at some point in the future. You don't know where they come from when you're using them. I have spent a lot of time trying to trace them down because it's part of the program that I teach, or it informs the program that I teach is a better way to say that. But nonetheless, we often don't know where it comes from. And I'm going to tell a story that I do have permission to tell. I teach it in our practical self-defense workshops, and I'm going to share it with you now. There was a woman in Berlin who came to me because she had been attacked. She wasn't there to take a self-defense class. She was so messed up about what had happened and how powerless she felt and how traumatic the whole thing was. She came to me to see if I could find a way to help her relieve some of the trauma that she was suffering from. So we talked about what happened. She had been out to dinner with friends. It was a summer evening. She wasn't far from where she lived. She was new to town though. So she was from Australia. She had moved to Berlin, I don't know, only a couple months prior. So she still didn't know all the ins and outs of the city and of German culture and of the way things are. And if you have ever been a long-term traveler in another country, or you've immigrated to another country, you'll know that your first period there, however long it is for you, you are usually really sensitive about not wanting to upset the natives. You're grateful that they're kind of letting you stay there, even if you have a right to be there. And so you usually kind of don't ever really want to bother them with anything because you just want to integrate and fit in and not cause trouble until you feel a little more solid on the ground. This is a really normal thing to feel. I felt this way when I moved to France. I felt this way when I moved to Germany. I felt this way when I moved to other American cities. It's normal. This woman was feeling the same thing. So she had been out to dinner with friends. She lived in a pretty safe part of the city. It was a summer evening. She was walking home, and as she's walking home, she was texting. She was continuing like a debate she was having with one of her friends from dinner. And as she's walking and texting on her phone, she happens to look up and see across the street some guy who's standing there. And she thinks to herself, oh, he's too far away to be a problem. It's okay. And she keeps going. She gets to her front door, and before she can put in her key in the front door, she turns, and this guy that she just previously saw as several meters away from her is right behind her. She doesn't know how he got there so fast, but he's suddenly right on top of her. And she knows that this is not safe. Part of her thinks, does he live here? Is he one of the neighbors that she's never met before? Part of her thinks she should probably start like buzzing all the buzzers. But part of her thinks, well, I mean, I don't want to disturb anyone. And what if I'm wrong? What if he really does live here? I don't want to insult him. And again, these are really normal things to think because women are so socialized to consider the consequences. At the same time, an alarm is going off inside of her. So she pushes open the front door, and then her instinct is to turn and close it as quickly as possible. She turns to face him to close it. As she does that, she gets punched in the face and falls down onto her back. The guy follows her in and starts pounding on her, grabs her purse, and then runs out. She's completely traumatized. Of course, this would traumatize anybody. So she's asking me when we meet, what could I have done differently? And the key thing she said to me was, it was probably really stupid of me to turn around and look the guy in the face, because then she got punched in the face. And I'm thinking to myself, when we're talking the first time, I'm thinking, yeah, probably it was a little bit stupid, because who dies from being punched in the back of the head? I didn't say this, but I said, I questioned it. And she told me that she had just been reading in an Australian news channel that there was an epidemic of people being donkey punched in Australia. I can't remember if it was Melbourne or Sydney or whatever, but people were getting punched in the back of the head, some of them so hard that they would fall forward on the sidewalk, crack their head, and die. So actually, yes, people can be killed from getting punched in the back of the head. Because she had gathered that news, that's why she responded in the way that she did. She was using self-defense. I apologized for even questioning her logic there once I understood the greater context of it, and also thanked her for learning something new. So now that's information I have, and now it's information you have too, because you've been listening. In the last episode, I was explaining a bit about the incident that I survived. A man broke into my home in the middle of the night and tried to kill me. Before the attack sort of started, while I was first face to face with this man standing in the bathroom, my brain was still pretty half asleep. At first, I thought that I was dreaming about this old ex, which I was immediately angry about, because I thought, why am I still dreaming about this jerk? Then I thought it was a neighbor. Then I realized, like, why would he be standing in my bathroom? And also, why would he be naked? And then I realized this was somebody I didn't know, and I was about to face a terrible problem. These thoughts happened within milliseconds. It took less time than it did for me to just go through it now vocally. My final thought before the attack sort of started, before the guy lunged at me, was stranger danger. That seems silly. And yet, that's the thought that fully woke me up, that fully brought me into the present moment so that I could defend myself, or at least try to stay alive. This incident happened when I was 32 years old. I learned about stranger danger just one day in a special school assembly when I was, I think, 8 years old in 1976. So I hadn't thought about stranger danger for 24 years. I learned it that one day, and then I didn't really hear about it again. Remember, that was 1976. So the approach that society in general had towards child abduction was really different. It wasn't as consistent as it is today, let's just say. So yeah, one day, 24 years prior, I had heard the term stranger danger, and that's what popped into my head to wake me up. However, many moments later, the guy grabbed my hair and was pounding my face with his fists, and yet my body was completely relaxed. That was its natural response. Or was it a natural response? It wasn't. It was a learned response, because many years prior, I had watched some video one day in one high school class about drunk drivers and why they tend to survive drunk driving accidents, because they are completely relaxed. That was a tiny little bit of information that I didn't even know was stored away in my head, and yet that's what my brain pulled up to help me survive. The video from my driver's ed class helped my body relax and absorb punches so that I didn't lose consciousness, and so that I actually had an opening where I could get away, sort of get away, or at least change the situation. These two things are evidence, and it's not just me that has this, but these two things are evidence of the way our brains work and the way our biological self-defense system works. We do things sometimes we don't really understand why. We don't know where that came from. We don't know how we knew how to do that or why we responded in a certain way. It's from information that we've gathered. So if you are interested in learning self-defense, but you don't have access to a self-defense class or a workshop, or you can't afford it, or whatever the deal is, or you don't feel comfortable doing that right now because of something that you may have experienced in the past, listening to podcasts like this one, watching movies, doing all these things and thinking about what would I do in this situation is also self-defense. Learn more about Pretty Deadly, find classes near you, or learn about our trainer certification programs at prettydeadlyselfdefense.com. Follow us on Instagram at Team Pretty Deadly, and you can find my very inconsistently posted rantings about politics, capitalism, sexism, and whatever else comes to mind on TikTok at Pretty Deadly Boss. The music that you hear is Icarus Wish by Berlin-based band Dead Centuries.